Hi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, and as always, happy whatever day it is you're watching this. Welcome to Left Side of the Aisle. This is actually episode 61 of Left Side of the Aisle, and I'm your host. My name is Larry Erickson, and for the next almost half hour, I'm going to be your ranter and raconteur. I'm going to be talking about things important to me I think deserve your attention and worthy of your attention. I like to mention every week that if you have any comments, questions, reactions, plaudits, brickbats, whatever about the show, you can, in fact, you should contact me directly. My email address is whoviating, WHOVIATING, whoviating at AOL.com. And if you didn't catch that, as again, I suspect every week that you didn't, my website, Lotus Surviving a Dark Time, will be around here somewhere during the show, and you can get the website from there. The one thing I ask, I do answer my email. I'm sometimes a little slow about it, admittedly, but the one thing I ask is that you include something in the subject line like, left side of the aisle or your cable show or something like that, so that I know it's not spam. All right, I got a couple of things to get through today. And the first thing, I'm going to start with some good news, and it's another bit of good news on what seems to be a continuing, won't call it a stream, but a continuing at least trickle of good news. This is on the topic of same-sex marriage. On June 6th, Judge Barbara Jones of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York ruled that the Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA as it's known, is unconstitutional in that it denies federal benefits to same-sex spouses who are legally married in their home states. This is the same basis on which the First Circuit Court of Appeals last week found that DOMA was unconstitutional. In addition, there have been two cases out of the Northern District of California federal court that have also held DOMA to be unconstitutional on the grounds that it discriminates against same-sex couples in a way that cannot be justified on any rational basis. That's like the legal standards you use, a rational basis. If there isn't one, then you can't stand. One of those cases will be up before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in the fall. Now, after the Obama administration said that it would no longer defend DOMA in court, House Speaker John Boehner put together what he called his bipartisan legal advisory group of the House of Representatives with the rather, I think, appropriate acronym of BLAG. He created this group to defend the law, and the group hired private attorney Paul Clement to do so. Well, Clement has now defended DOMA in 4 separate court cases and has lost all 4 times. There's a footnote to this. I mentioned last week that the full Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals had declined to rehear a decision by a 3-judge panel that California's Proposition 8, which undid rights gained by same-sex couples, could not stand. It was invalid. Well, 3 judges dissented from that decision. They said in part that, I'm quoting them here, "We have now declared that animus must have been the only conceivable motivation for a sovereign state to have remained committed to a definition of marriage that has existed for millennia." Well, the legal basis was, again, that you can't simply take a group of people and strip away legal rights which they had already gained. But, in fact, yes, they're right. Those judges are right. Animus is the only conceivable reason to deny same-sex couples their equal rights. Yes, that is the reason. All right, moving on from there. The past couple of weeks, I have talked about what I call the commons. This is that range of a social and political culture where the general interests cross and meet. It's the area where the common interests of the society lie, the area where everybody can and legitimately can obtain benefits, where everybody can and legitimately can take part, and where all have some responsibility, each to the other and to the whole. I've also talked about attacks on that idea, attacks on the idea that we as a people, that we as a society have common interests that we can address together. It now seems that every week brings a new example of another attack on the commons. This week, it comes from Witless Romney. He was, it was reported, skeptical of President Hopi Changey's take on the economy. Obama, this is quoting Romney now. Obama says we need more firemen, more policemen, more teachers. Did he not get the message from Wisconsin? It's time for us to cut back on government and help the American people. Now, there are a number of things about this statement which anybody with a brain and a conscience should find rather repulsive. One is the obvious thing that he's saying that even as our population grows, we're going to need fewer firefighters, cops, and teachers, which is nonsensical on its face. The second thing is that he is saying not only that firefighters, cops, and teachers aren't helping the American people, but that somehow they're not part of the American people. They are separate. They are other. They are them. And that brings me to the underlying point here, the underlying point I wanted to make. He referred to firefighters, cops, and teachers, but I'm sure he would be willing to add public health nurses, sanitation workers, bus drivers, a lot of other people, because all those people have one thing in common. They are public employees. They work for the government. Attacking government is a linchpin of an attack on the commons, because government, well, first off, it's the most obvious symbol of the commons, and more importantly, it's a central player in the commons. It's a central player in maintaining the idea that we are a society, not an atomized collection of individuals, each of them in constant competition with all the other isolated individuals. Some time ago, I said that the ideal of government is, government is ideally the agency through which a people act on their ideals. Now, obviously, probably every government in history has fallen short of that ideal, but that's why it's an ideal. That's why it's what you're constantly shooting for. It is the idea of government. That's why the attacks have slid so smoothly from attacks on big government to attacks on the ordinary people who work in that government, who do the public jobs. Because it never was about big government. It never was about making government more efficient. It was about the attacking the very idea of government, the very idea that the people of a society could actually work together through government for their own mutual benefit and gain. Now, this is not new. This is not new. Literally 30 years ago, I was denouncing what I called, and I'm quoting myself here, political programs that appeal to the worst in our cultural heritage, that speak to selfishness, competitiveness, suspicion, and a what's in it for me attitude. At the time, I accused the right wing of seeking, quoting again, to arouse a meanness of manner and selfishness of soul among the American people, to divide us against ourselves, empty us of a compassion, and make what the British call "I'm all right, Jack" our national motto. That is, they want you to think of yourselves in isolation. You're working, you're not hungry, your house hasn't been foreclosed on, so the hell with everybody else. That's why, again, quoting myself here, that's why they speak of the personal, but never of the public, of self, but never of others, of us and them, but never of we, of family, but never of community. In fact, they're afraid to talk of community because that means to talk of social obligations, of moral commitments to what you could call a type of extended family that goes far beyond their circumscribed view. All right, now let me pause here for just a second. To answer a question that may well be running through your heads, and legitimately so. Just who are they? Now, I'll be blunt here. I'm talking about the right wing, and even more than that, I'm talking about the rich, the economic elite, the 1%, if you will. Now, don't dare any of you respond to that by emailing me and claiming that I've said that every person in the country with a wealth at that level is evil, and point to some supposedly contrary example and thereby claiming to have positively refuted everything I've said. You'll only make yourself look lame, really. I'm not saying that every single rich individual is a money-grubbing, greed-driven sociopath whose only concern for the rest of us is what benefit we can be to their personal bottom line. I'm just saying that as a group, as a whole, they are money-grubbing, greed-driven sociopaths whose only concern for the rest of us is how we might personally benefit their personal bottom line. And the thing is, this economic elite, both individual and corporate, that elite is now essentially in charge of our government. And the higher up in levels of government you go, the stronger the control is. We saw that just the other day with a release of a bunch of emails detailing how the Obama gang negotiated a deal with the pharmaceutical industry in order to get that so-called health reform law, which actually should have been called the Health Insurance Industry Enrichment Act, but cutting the deals to get that thing passed. And how, as part of that deal, the O crowd gave away the biggest thing that actually could have quickly and significantly reduced medicine costs for Americans. The reimportation of drugs is now still specifically banned by law, despite the fact that there is no safety, no medical, no health-related reason for doing this, except for the healthy profits of the pharmaceutical industry. These sorts of, I hesitate to call them concerns, but these sorts of things, they'll get a friendly reception in Congress. They will. It's not surprising, considering that according to the Center for Responsive Politics, 249 members of the current Congress are millionaires. And in fact, that's about 47% of the total of Congress. And the current median net worth of a United States senator is over $2.5 million. These are the sorts of people who have the power now. They are. We have to acknowledge that. They are the people who have the power. But they also have a problem and a perpetual worry. There are a lot more of us than there are of them. That's why they want you to feel isolated. That's why they want you to feel alone. That's why they want you to feel government is them. That's why they want you to feel that everything to do with government is other, is separate from you, is somehow alien, even threatening. That's why they want you to think, as they'll proudly say, government is the problem. Because they know that the one thing that can effectively challenge their power, the one thing that can provide a counterweight to their power, the one thing that can do this is an aroused citizenry acting through our government. I mean, why do you think these people first promoted, then moved in on, and then took over the Tea Party movement? Because those people had been conditioned, if you will, they've been predisposed to think of government as the enemy. As the result was that movement could quickly and actually was rather easily moved from its initial anger, which was sort of evenly split between government and the banks, to being strictly a government bad, not government good movement that could present a facade of populist involvement while actually serving the interests of the elites. At the same time, why do you think they were so terrified of the Occupy movement? Why were they so eager first to dismiss it, then to mock it, then to try to crush it, then to undermine it, and now to insist that it's dead and buried and gone? Because Occupy identifies. The Occupy movement identifies the issue as the concentration of economic wealth, the concentration of economic power. A concentration that has grown dramatically and continues to grow even as the bulk of us suffered. Almost all the increases in our total national wealth are going to the richest among us. And at the same time, between 2000 and 2007, the bulk of us suffered a record loss in wealth. The median wealth suffered a record decline in that 3-year period. Don't forget, it was the Occupy movement that introduced the idea of the 99%. So why are the elites so scared of Occupy? Because Occupy aims at the right target. Bottom line here, firefighters, cops, teachers, public health nurses, sanitation workers, scientists of the EPA, clerks in the bowels of some state's bureaucracy. These people are not your enemies. And while our present overseers, our present governors, may well be our enemies, government is not. And we're going to take a break. And here we are, and we're back. And last week I started about I said it was going to be a new occasional feature, but it seems that I keep finding reasons to bring it up. So who knows, maybe more regular than I thought. It is the Clarabell Award. And this is given for people and events that are just stupid. This case would go out to Mount Healthy, Ohio. This is a suburb of Cincinnati. Now, recently they held their high school graduation, and one of the seniors was a guy named Anthony Cornist. He was on the football team. Apparently he's very popular among students and teachers at the school. Apparently he was a little too popular, it seems. When his name was called at the graduation ceremonies and he went up to get his diploma, his friends and family cheered enough that Cornist was denied his diploma. Instead, the principal handed him a letter saying that because of the disruption, his diploma would be held in the principal's office until he did 20 hours of community service. Now, note here, Cornist did nothing wrong. He walked up on stage, he was supposed to be his diploma, but it was this letter, and he walked across the stage to where he was supposed to stand. He did nothing wrong. The school even admitted as much. School superintendent Lori Handler said that all the students, which means including of necessity Cornist, the students were angelic. So the school now, without question, is trying to punish Anthony Cornist for something others did over which he had no control. When the absurdity of that was pointed out to Handler, she doubled down on the nonsense by saying that, well, his family could do the community service for him, which means the school is now trying to impose a punishment on people over whom they have no authority of any kind whatsoever and never did. In fact, I will triple down on the nonsense. The video, and by the way, if you go to my website and look up, you'll see that under the section where it refers to the Clarabell Award, there's a website to, I think it's WCPO, I think that's it. That's the local TV station in Cincinnati that covered this. And if you go there, they have actually a video clip of the graduation, be able to actually see it. This video clearly shows the principal giving Cornist the letter when he first came up on stage to get his diploma. But Handler says the problem wasn't the volume of the cheering, it was the duration, which the principal clearly could not have known at the time that he gave Cornist the letter demanding community service. This may be a good part of the reason now why Handler now refuses to be interviewed and says that she will only comment through a written statement that's being prepared with the help of the attorney for the school district. And the thing is, on top of everything else, despite being denied his diploma, Cornist is still a legal graduate. His transcripts are still available to any school, to any potential employer. And what's more, the school may have broken several laws by doing this, by trying to impose a punishment that is beyond their legal authority to do. There can be no doubt about this. The administration of the high school of Mount Healthy, Ohio, is composed of clowns. All right, from there, we're going to move on again to what is our regular weekly feature. This is the Outrage of the Week. This is a rather curious edition of the Outrage of the Week because I'm not quite sure who the outrage should be directed against. Let's just say for the moment that there's enough to go around. Recently, the New York Times published two revealing articles about potentially illegal programs carried on by the Obama administration. One had to do with the use of drones. Now, I talked about this last week. The other had to do with the fact that after coming into office, the O crowd accelerated a program of increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks on Iran. On June 1st, the New York Times, in this article, noted that this, I'm quoting the Times, significantly expanded America's first sustained use of cyber weapons, and said that the attacks, quoting again, appeared to be the first time the United States has repeatedly used cyber weapons to cripple another country's infrastructure, achieving with computer code what until then could be accomplished only by bombing a country or sending in agents to plant explosives. Now, what that bland description slips by without comment, perhaps without even noticing, which might be even worse, this is an act of war. The United States is seeking to, quoting again, cripple another country's infrastructure, in a way that previously would have involved bombing. Now, is trying to cripple part of a country's industrial capacity, trying to cripple part of the industrial capacity of a sovereign nation, is this an act of war? Well, if you doubt it, ask yourself, what would be the reaction, what would be your reaction if it was revealed that Iran was doing it to us? If you still doubt it, consider that last year the White House commissioned a major study of cyberspace, which found that, quoting, states have an inherent right to self-defense that may be triggered by certain aggressive acts in cyberspace. And also said, when warranted, the United States will respond to hostile acts in cyberspace as we would to any other threat to our country. And if you still doubt this is an act of war, consider that more than a year ago, the Pentagon concluded that computer sabotage coming from another country, yes, could be an act of war. Oh, and by the way, don't bother saying, oh, this is all about Iran's nuclear weapons program, so this is really just self-defense. According to the consensus view of the 16 U.S. intelligence services, there is no Iranian nuclear weapons program. There's a nuclear enrichment program, but that can be just as easily applied to nuclear power as nuclear weapons, and in fact is just as necessary for a nuclear power program. Well, in 2007, an intelligence finding, U.S. intelligence finding, concluded that Iran had abandoned its nuclear weapons program years earlier. That finding was reaffirmed in 2010 by a national intelligence estimate, and it remains the consensus view among American intelligence agencies. And in fact, they've even testified to Congress to this effect. There is no Iranian nuclear weapons program. And so when people refer to it, in fact, Hillary Clinton just recently referred to Iran's nuclear weapons. She was lying. So we're left at the end. The Barack administration, President Hopi Chang'i, our Nobel Peace Prize winner, has in effect declared war on Iran, and our oh so important watchdog media can't even be bothered to notice. Now, I'm not sure which one of those should be the outrage of the week, but damn straight one of them is. All right, we're going to end up, I should have about 5 minutes left, I suppose. We're going to end up on an occasional feature. This is something that comes up. It's for stuff that's not particularly, it's not political, it's not terribly important, just kind of interesting, fun stuff to have. It is And Another Thing. This week, we actually got a twofer with And Another Thing. We got something old and something new. First one, we're going to do the old. In the prologue to William Shakespeare's Henry V, the chorus asks, and I'm quoting, "Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very casks that did affright the air at Agincourt?" Now, this cockpit and this wooden O obviously referred to the theater in which the play was being performed. A theater, that is, where some of Shakespeare's plays were first staged. And a theater, it turns out, whose remains archaeologists have just recently discovered in London behind a pub that was scheduled for redevelopment. The theater was called The Curtain. It opened in 1577. It operated till about 1620. It was home to Shakespeare's acting company, the Lord Chamberlain's Men, from about 1597 to 1599. After that is when they moved to the Globe Theater, which, again, the remnants have been found, but what the Globe Theater that's in London now, if you heard about it in Suffolk, that's a reconstruction based on descriptions of the old theater. But this is, they actually found it because experts from the Museum of London, the Museum of the City of London, have uncovered part of the gravel yard and gallery walls of this theater, a 435-year-old theater. They found it in Shoreditch. This is an area in London. It's just east of what is now the main business district, and it's actually about 2 miles north of where the city walls would have stood in 1599. The site is going to be further excavated, and the developer says that he's going to preserve the site, and that's good news. All right, now that's the old. This is the new. The world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator is called the Large Hadron Collider. It's an underground ring some 17 miles in diameter, in circumference rather, 17 miles in circumference near Geneva, Switzerland. It's been nicknamed the Big Bang Machine because its purpose is to try to simulate the conditions that existed in the very earliest moments of our universe. Recently, one of the scientists working there, her name is Dr. Pauline Gagnon of the University of Indiana, Bloomington. She posted a blog entry describing a surprise she encountered in the course of her work. Everything on what she was doing, everything seemed to be going smoothly until near the end of her shift. Another scientist called her to report unexpected fluctuations in the data stream, a series of curious dips in the data stream. So she called the control room to find out what was going on and was rather casually told by the operator, that's because the moon is nearly full and I have to periodically adjust the proton beam orbits. In fact, these orbits had to be adjusted every couple of hours. Here's what was going on. One side of the accelerator was slightly closer to the moon. So the moon's gravity was pulling slightly more strongly on one side of the accelerator than the other, deforming the accelerator enough that the tunnel through which the beams passed was distorted, and they had to adjust for that in order to have your results be accurate. Now, this blog post caused a fair bit of comments. Some of it was snarky, some of it was amused about how this powerful instrument was no match for the moon. But here's what I wanted to point out. The moon is, on average, a touch under 239,000 miles from Earth, actually 238,800 and some odd miles on average from the Earth. Even at that distance, what you're saying is the difference in gravitational force between 2 points no more than 17 miles apart. That is 1/7,000th of 1% of the total difference. The difference in gravitational strength was enough to affect the results of experiments. So I just want you to contemplate for a moment what this tells you about how incredibly delicate, how mind-bendingly precise are the experiments being done by physicists today. All right, that's it for me. That's it for me. I'm going to wrap up there. I want to remind you, Saturday. Coming Saturday. This is the open house down here at CCAT. It's our open house from noon to 6. Come on down here. There's going to be live programming, other stuff going on. You can see how you can do your own show. You can see how you can learn to run a camera, learn to do the graphics, learn all kinds of stuff, or just come on down here and meet some of us and say hi and maybe join. A little money comes in, better equipment, all kinds of things we can do. Anyway, that's my promotion. I'll be here. I hope to see you here on Saturday. You have a great week. Bye.